All right. I believe I am live. It is Selection Sunday. Almost said Saturday. It is Selection Sunday. So I am live. You guys should be able to hear me all right. Should be able to see me all right. Everything coming through. How is everybody doing on this very contentious day? If you guys have been watching ESPN at all any of this morning, the idea between Alabama and Ohio State is ripping the network apart. They have people on these college football panels just fighting with each other and taking really weird jabs at each other. Good morning, good morning. John, Nick, Matt, Connor, Alfred. What's going on, everybody? So, it is Sunday, December 3rd. It is time for the committee to select the 4 teams for the college football playoff for 2017, although I think they call it the 2018 playoff for some reason. So we have about an hour until they actually make these selections. My TV is all the way across the room to the right, so if I'm glancing that way, that is what I'm looking at. I got my little microphone over here to the right. Just as a little bit of a warning for anybody watching on the replay or watching live, I did not get a whole lot of sleep last night. So if I randomly yawn or forget what I'm saying, it is going to be due in large part to the fact that I did not get a whole lot of sleep. So yeah, we got a good bit to talk about. Part of the reason why I didn't sleep a lot was I decided to make pros and cons lists for Alabama and Ohio State. So I'm going to go over those here shortly. But quickly, I want to kind of talk to you guys for just a minute. Chat is on the screen. Of course, I always get lost in chat with questions, and now with this kind of going over this. So if you are dying to ask me a question and want to make sure I see it, you can always drop me a super chat, just like $1 or $2 or however many you want to drop, I guess, and that will be guaranteed to see it. I have the actual super chat window open, so I won't miss them. So I can always circle back around. It may not be immediate, especially when I start talking about Alabama and Ohio State. So there's a chance. So if I'm looking to the right, it's to the TV. They keep having these people on that are just yelling at each other. Heather Dinich and Paul Feinbaum got into it earlier, and just a few minutes ago, Joe Tessitore and wide receiver for the Buccaneers, Joey Galloway, got into it. So it's been we're not the only ones that don't exactly know what's going to happen. So what did you guys think about the championship games yesterday? You had Clemson stomping Miami. I assume Clemson will be number 1 in the college football playoff poll. You had Oklahoma stomping TCU. I assume they will be number 2. You had Georgia stomping Auburn, which was extraordinarily surprising to me, and I believe Georgia will be number 3. It'll be between Alabama and Ohio State for the 4th spot. Even though really Wisconsin and USC should kind of be in this situation as well, in this conversation. USC has more top 40 wins than either Alabama or Ohio State, and they're a conference champion, and they had an aggressive non-conference schedule in Texas and Notre Dame, and they played a 9-game conference schedule like Ohio State did. And then, of course, Wisconsin went 12-0, lost by 6 points in a game where they were driving at the end of the game for a chance to go up 28-27 for the win. They were undefeated going into that game. Can you imagine if Alabama was undefeated going into the SEC championship game and then they lost to Georgia? Everybody would say, whether Alabama wins or not, they're in. But we are not saying that with Wisconsin, even though they have very similar strength of schedules. So it's pretty interesting that it was just like, yeah, Wisconsin's out now. Theoretically, they shouldn't be. So, I was talking a lot on Twitter last night about how I think Ohio State is probably going to be the team that they pick. I keep waffling between Alabama and Ohio State, not who I think should be in, but who I think the committee is going to put in, because when I was making the pros and cons list that I'm gonna read out here in a few minutes, I would make a point. I'd be like, man, that's a really good point. There's no way they can keep Ohio State out. And then I would say something, and I would say, oh man, that's a really great point. There's no way they can keep Alabama out. And it kind of went back and forth. So, yeah. UCF better than Alabama. Well, if we had an 18 playoff, we could figure that out, right? This whole thing, you know, is if you're talking about who's number 4, Alabama or Ohio State, one of those teams is going to be number 4. If it's so razor thin, is number 4 really that much better than number 5? If not, well then shouldn't number 5 get a shot? And if number 6 is going to end up being Wisconsin, which I think it may end up being, Wisconsin went 12-0. Should they not get a shot? Like, this is why when you start talking about expanding the playoffs, these situations, you can say the regular season matters more with 4 teams, but I don't see it. So if we had an 8-team playoff, I kind of did a quick little jot down of nothing, just kind of what I was thinking. These would be your 8 teams: Clemson, Oklahoma, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Wisconsin, UCF, USC. Penn State would probably be somewhere in there. Maybe even Auburn, considering where they were at number 2 coming into this past week. That would be an extraordinarily fun playoff. That would be a great playoff. Give UCF a shot with Scott Frost. See what USC could do. They wouldn't just be out of every conversation for some reason. Wisconsin, who had a perfect, undefeated regular season, which only one other team in the country can say, they would get a shot. The one loss wouldn't be detrimental. So, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Did I watch Boise versus Fresno? A little bit. So, I was kind of flipping between that game, the Big Ten, and the ACC, and the 2 Power 5 conference championship games took precedence. I was also watching Arkansas State Troy. So I was kind of flipping around. But Fresno certainly had some opportunities. I remember a big fumble that Boise got when Fresno was driving. Is Auburn better than USC? I don't know. I really don't know. It depends on which Auburn team shows up. I think Kerryon Johnson, I don't want to say hurt his team, but him not being healthy certainly played a factor in the SEC championship game. And I felt like in the first Auburn-Georgia game, the Bulldogs let the momentum in a raucous stadium kind of take them away. And when it was more half and half, and they knew coming into it a little bit more what to expect from Auburn, they dealt better. I thought it was really interesting that in the first Auburn-Georgia game, that Georgia drove right down the field and scored a touchdown, and then Auburn took the game over. And in this one, it was Auburn that drove right down the field and scored a touchdown, and then Georgia took the game over. So it was a really nice role reversal. And, you know, it's the way I view all of these rematches. So Auburn won the first game, Georgia won the second one. Both of them basically were blowouts. In the Fresno-Boise game, Fresno won last week at home. Boise won this week at home. So couldn't they kind of just be a wash? So if you were to look at the 18 playoff, Auburn would have a case. You know, the game against Georgia, 2 of their 3 losses would be against the number 1 team in the country in Clemson and the number 3 team in the country in Georgia. So, is there any chance NC State makes the Orange Bowl? No. Miami will be in the Orange Bowl. All right, so I'm going to. We got about 50 minutes. I'm really hoping I don't forget. That would really suck if I was just talking and giving, pontificating about things, and then I was like, oh, it's like 12:15. It's already been released, so I have to keep an eye on time. But I have this little sheet of paper here. So what I want to do is kind of go over Alabama and Ohio State's schedules, and then kind of compare some pros and some cons that I came up with, and see what you guys think. So I'm going to do the Alabama one first. Then I'll stop and kind of read you what you guys are saying a little bit about Alabama. So for the next hour or so, let's kind of try to keep it to the playoff, because some of the bowl games are yet to be determined. I think those come out at 7 tonight, so that'll be really cool. The New Year's Six game, it all depends on who gets where. So if Alabama gets in, Auburn will probably play Miami in the Orange Bowl. UCF against, I don't know, because it'll be UCF in Auburn in the Peach Bowl, Alabama, Miami in the Orange Bowl if Ohio State gets in. And then you'd have TCU, Penn State in the Cotton Bowl, USC, Wisconsin in the Fiesta, which is like a de facto Rose Bowl this year. But, all right, anyway, so let me get into Alabama. So if we look through their schedule, the College Football Playoff, the first poll came out on Halloween. So up until then, they beat then number 3 Florida State, because remember, the committee takes into account what the ranking of the team was when they played them. So they beat number 3 Florida State, who finished 6-6. They beat Fresno State, who finished 9-4 and was the Mountain West champion. They beat Colorado State, who finished 7-5. They beat Vanderbilt, who finished 5-7. They beat Ole Miss, who finished 6-6, though is not technically a bowl game. I think they would count towards the bowl total because they finished 6-6. Traveled out to Texas A&M and beat an Aggies team that finished 7-5. Beat Arkansas and Tennessee in back-to-back weeks. Both of those teams finished 4-8. Beat number 19 LSU that finished 9-3. Traveled to number 16 Mississippi State. So starting with the LSU game, the College Football Playoff rankings were officially out. So they traveled to number 19 in the playoff ranking LSU. They finished 9-3. Or I'm sorry, that was at home. They traveled out to number 16 Mississippi State, who finished 8-4, with the Egg Bowl kind of sort of not counting. They played an FCS team in Mercer, and then they traveled to number 6 Auburn, who finished 10-3 and lost. So not the greatest resume in the world. Of those, they played 4 ranked teams when they played the teams originally. 4 of those were ranked. One of those was Florida State, which is no longer ranked. One of those is Auburn, which they lost, and they have an FCS school in there. So wins against bowl teams, including Ole Miss, would be 7. Wins over ranked teams currently in the College Football Playoff top 25 as of last week is 3. Wins over ranked teams as of Tuesday were number 17 LSU, number 23 Mississippi State, and number 25 Fresno State. That's it. Fresno lost, and the only team that Alabama lost to in Auburn lost. So that does not look good for Alabama at all. So made the little pros and cons list. These are in the pros. So I really think that if you look at Alabama and Ohio State as candidates, I think overall, the safer bet is Alabama. So the way I kind of have framed the way I think about these two teams is Alabama's the better team. I do believe on a neutral field, Alabama would beat Ohio State. If they played 10 times, I think Alabama would probably win 7 or maybe even 8 of those times. I think they are better overall on both sides of the ball than Ohio State is. But if you look at most deserving, it's Ohio State. So it's best team versus most deserving. And I think that's where a lot of this infighting is happening, where people are trying to defend one way or the other when that's kind of how it is framed. So some of the pros, Alabama was ranked number 1 all year long. Their only loss of the year was on the road in a rivalry game against the team that after they beat Alabama went on to become the number 2 team in the nation. If you're going to lose to a team, that's one to lose to. That is not that embarrassing. My eye test, and I think most people's eye test, says that Alabama's probably better than Ohio State. So how much is the committee factoring in eye test to what is actually going on, to the statistics, to all of this data that they supposedly have access to? last week, how about I said Auburn? Last week, Alabama was ranked 5th in the poll. Ohio State was ranked 8th. Wisconsin was 4th. Wisconsin was undefeated. They had 2 1-loss teams and 1 2-loss team ranked ahead of them. The 2-loss team that had already beaten Alabama. So, Wisconsin was a team that the committee never really respected. Ask a Wisconsin fan if they felt respected by the committee. They did not. So if the committee did not respect Wisconsin, why would Ohio State, being ranked 8th, already being behind Alabama, beating a team that didn't really seem to impress the committee too much, why would that launch them 4 spots and leapfrog Alabama? That is something that the committee has not cared about in the past. If you look at 2014, Ohio State was 6th, TCU was 4th, and they leapfrogged the Horned Frogs to get into that final spot. So maybe it doesn't matter. Vegas has Alabama as the favorite in the point spread on a neutral field against all 3 teams that we all presume are going to be in the playoff in Georgia, Oklahoma, and Clemson. Vegas has Alabama actually as the favorite in all of those games. They've never not been in the playoff, so putting Alabama in might be considered the safer bet because Ohio State has already missed the playoffs. Alabama hasn't. That could also be a con, too, because maybe the committee's like, hey, you've already been in 3. If you get left out of 1, you'll live, right? So I don't really know. And the Clemson's number 1. Clemson will play in the Sugar Bowl. So whoever they match up with, whether it's Ohio State or Alabama, they're going to be number 4, I think. So that means they'll play Clemson in New Orleans. Tuscaloosa is a hell of a lot closer to New Orleans than Columbus is. Though when Alabama and Ohio State played in the Sugar Bowl a couple years ago, it was very well attended by both teams. Maybe that matters. Again, I think the committee is biased. I think that they don't sit around and just go into the stats. I do think they factor in things like what would be the better matchup? Who would travel better? I think those conversations come up. What would turn the dials on ESPN for more people to watch? I do think those conversations happen. And in that case, maybe that's a pro for Alabama that they're closer. They're within driving distance of New Orleans. I've driven from Tuscaloosa to New Orleans. It's really not that bad at all. And the last pro that I have in the Alabama column is last year, we saw what Alabama versus Clemson was. Now, these are 2 very different teams now. It's not going to be the same game, but I don't think it'll be too different from what we saw last year in the national championship game. We also saw what Ohio State Clemson was last year in the Fiesta Bowl, and that was not a very pretty game. So there is an excellent chance that Alabama Clemson is just going to be a better game. There's a chance that Clemson would be pretty heavily favored against Ohio State. I think they would beat Ohio State. I think Clemson probably would beat Alabama as well, but I think it would be a closer game throughout the game. I don't think that Clemson would pull away the way that they may pull away against Ohio State. And that's something that I think the committee will probably have to look at. 2 straight years, we've had a Big Ten team in the playoff, and 2 straight years, that team has been shut out in the semifinal. Of course, Big Ten was in there when Ohio State in 2014, and they won the national championship. But the last 2 years, the Big Ten hasn't looked that great. In the New Year's Six Bowls last year, they went 1-3. They got 4 teams in. The one win was Wisconsin team over Western Michigan. Not world beaters, probably, even though they were 13-0 going into that game. So that's probably maybe going through the committee's head as well. Maybe we can let the Big Ten sit this one out. Alabama's probably the safer choice. You would also have a really interesting rematch if you had Clemson and Oklahoma in the Sugar Bowl. Clemson and Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, and then Oklahoma, Georgia in the Rose Bowl. Those 4 teams all have history. If Alabama were to beat Clemson, they would face either SEC rival Georgia, it'd be Kirby Smart versus his mentor in Nick Saban, or it would be the rematch of the 2014 Sugar Bowl, where Oklahoma, I think, basically upset Alabama. I think I would call that an upset. After the whole kick 6 game, kept Alabama out of that SEC championship. And if Clemson wins, they get to play either their old rival in Georgia, in Atlanta, which would be the hottest ticket in the history of college football, or a rematch against Baker Mayfield in Oklahoma when Clemson started this whole dynasty building in 2015 when they knocked off Baker Mayfield after Oklahoma led in the 2015 Orange Bowl. So those are kind of the pros. The cons, obviously the biggest one for Alabama, they are not a division or a conference champion. Ohio State is. The committee kind of seems to fluctuate on whether they care about that or not, so it's really hard to pin that down. But Alabama not being a champion, losing to the team that lost the conference championship, not the best look in the world, while Ohio State went on to win the conference championship. But, of course, Ohio State set the precedent last year where they didn't win anything and they got in, so it's not completely unheard of. What is Alabama's best win? Is it LSU? I mean, LSU beat Auburn, something Alabama didn't. Is it Mississippi State? That's a much tougher Mississippi State team and crowd than the one that Ole Miss beat, certainly, without Nick Fitzgerald. So, other things going against Alabama, there's never been two teams from one conference in the playoffs. Now, if it really is down to Ohio State and Alabama, it doesn't really matter. They're going to have to break a rule one way or the other. They're either going to have to let in the very first two-loss team into the playoffs, which they seem perfectly fine to do with Auburn last week when they were number 2 in the poll, or they're going to have to let in two teams from the same conference for the first time. Either way, they're going to have to break, I don't know if you can count 3 years of tradition, but something they haven't ever done before. And, of course, like I already said this weekend, Auburn and Fresno State both lost. So, Alabama's best win, LSU, maybe Mississippi State. Fresno State losing was not good for the Tide. Auburn losing was not good for the Tide. And they are pretty similar to Wisconsin as far as the way the committee seems to be viewing their schedule, their strength of schedule, who they've played, and how tough their entire year has been. And Wisconsin, after losing to Ohio State, is out of the conversation, it seems like. Maybe the committee will surprise us, but it seems like they're out of the entire conversation about the 4th spot in the playoff. And if Ohio State beat Wisconsin with a very similar feel, at least to the committee, as to what Alabama's schedule was, the theory could be that Ohio State may beat Alabama, in which case, why would we put the Tide in? So that's kind of what I'm thinking as far as pros and cons for the Crimson Tide. So we'll put that over here for a second and grab a drink of water, see what you guys are saying. Bama and Ohio State should play for the 4th spot? Yeah. Do like they do in the MLB wildcard, right? Just get them, do an extra little playoff game. Make it not next week because that's Army-Navy. Make it the 16th. Let them play in for the Sugar Bowl. Can Auburn still make it? No, Dylan, they cannot. 3 losses, they're out. Number of losses means nothing. This is not the BCS. Carlos is absolutely, I think it's a junior, not junior, but Carlos is right. Number of losses doesn't mean anything, but the quality of the loss does. And we'll get into that when we talk about Ohio State here in just a second. So you could really be really basic and boil it down just to Bama lost 1 game, Ohio State lost 2. We're done. But it's not quite that simple. If Alabama gets in, it will show a clear bias towards Alabama. I disagree. I think you could argue that either way because Alabama has, they got into the BCS championship game. I know it was different, but they got in the BCS championship game against LSU when maybe some people thought they shouldn't. But Ohio State has been in 2 playoffs now. I didn't think they should be in. So I would actually counter that and say if Ohio State gets in, that would be more of a case of bias or perceived bias by a lot of people. Ohio State has a bad loss, but they have proven they can keep up with the top teams. Right, but if you're in the playoff, you're not supposed to keep up with the top teams. You're supposed to go out and beat the top teams. And remember, and we'll talk about it here in a second, Ohio State lost to Oklahoma at home badly, and Oklahoma is in the playoff. Can't lose late in the season, no games to recover. It shouldn't matter. That was something else that I think the committee wanted to take away from the old BCS system, where if you lost in November, it hurts you more than you losing in September. It shouldn't. A loss is a loss is a loss. But you're also supposed to kind of grow and get better as the season goes on, and if you lose at the end, you don't really have that many more games after that to wash the taste out of your mouth, which makes sense too. Hello, Renee. Who do you think will win, Oklahoma or Georgia? I don't know. That is going to be a fun game. Thank you, Freedy GTV. I appreciate it. That's going to be a really fun game. Georgia, Oklahoma. It's going to feel weird that it's at the Rose Bowl. It doesn't feel like a Rose Bowl game. And my nose is itching again. It itched on the last live stream on Thursday night, too. ESPN and the committee want Clemson versus Alabama 3. Alabama will get the 4 spot. I can see that. I can absolutely see that. Yes, hit that like button, please. Thank you. But Iowa was a trap game. Oh, I don't care. Don't lose to Iowa by 31 points. Okay, so, speaking of that, we are 32 minutes away. They don't have a countdown. If this was CNN or something, they would have like a countdown for like 38 hours out to this stupid thing. But ESPN doesn't have a countdown, but we're about 32 minutes away. So let me go through Ohio State's schedule here and their resume and their pros and cons. Because when you compare it to Alabama, it might be interesting. So they started the season at Indiana, finished 5-7. They played number 5 Oklahoma, again number 5 in the AP poll when they played at home, and lost 31-16. But it was worse than what that score seems to indicate. They played an Army team that actually went on to be a really good team. Probably going to win the Commander-in-Chief trophy next week. That Army team finished 8-3. Well, not finished. They still have the Navy game, but they're 8-3 right now. Then they beat UNLV at home, who failed to go to a bowl game at 5-7. Then 3 straight 4-8 games. So they traveled to Rutgers and won, faced Maryland at home, and traveled to Nebraska. All 3 of those teams finished 4-8 and missing bowl eligibility. Then they came back to beat number 2 Penn State, who finished 10-2 at home. Without a doubt, that's their best win, in my opinion. I think that's a better win than the win over number 4 Wisconsin they just had. In the college football playoff, at Iowa, they won. I'm sorry, obviously they lost 55-24, and Iowa finished 7-5, kind of run-of-the-mill loss. And if they had just had that loss, you might be more forgiving in the same way the committee was towards Clemson and Syracuse, even though that wasn't by 31 points. They may be more forgiven, but with the Oklahoma loss, at that point in the Eliminator videos, if you remember, I crossed them out after that because 31-point loss on the road to a ranked team, or to a team that's not ranked, done. Done in my book. But as the season progressed, we saw that didn't happen. So then, now the college football playoff poll is out. They beat number 13 Michigan State at home, who went on to be 9-3. Beat Illinois at home, 2-10. And then traveled out to a now 8-4 Michigan Wolverines team, 131-20. And then they beat number 3 Wisconsin 12-1. Or, sorry, again, not a lot of sleep. They beat number 3 Wisconsin, who went on to be 12-1 after Ohio State's loss, or the loss to Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship. So they finished up 11-2. They don't put the Big Ten Championship in your official conference record for the year, but if they did, the Buckeyes finished 9-1 in the Big Ten. They played 10 Big Ten games, 9 in the regular season, and the game against Wisconsin. Wins against bowl teams, 7. The same amount of wins against bowl teams that Alabama has. Wins against ranked teams, teams that are currently ranked in the, or no, they beat 4 teams that were ranked when they played them. 1 more than Alabama did. Wins versus ranked teams in the top 25 poll for the committee as of this past Tuesday, 3. Number 4, Wisconsin. Number 9, Penn State. Number 16, Michigan State. The highest ranked team in this week's poll, the poll that just came out on Tuesday, that Alabama had beaten, is number 17, LSU. All 3 of those teams I just named, Wisconsin, Penn State, and Michigan State, are all ranked ahead of LSU. So you could argue Alabama's best win is LSU, while Ohio State has 3 wins better than that, including one in a championship game. So that is quite a feat if you're trying to compare the two on paper. So some pros for Ohio State. Obviously, division and conference champion. I think that's the beginning of the argument between these two teams to begin with. They have gotten in 2014 and 2016, leapfrogging Baylor and TCU in 2014, not winning their division, not winning their conference in 2016, and still getting in while the division and conference winner Penn State did not. If you want to view that as bias, you can. If you want to view that as the resume or the brand, you can also see it that way. All I'm saying is the committee has found ways for Ohio State to get it in the past. They defeated an undefeated team at the end of the year. Did Ohio State get better? Could you say that they got carried away in the emotion of that Iowa game in the same way Georgia did against Auburn, and that they bounced back? Because after the Iowa game, they beat Michigan State, they beat Michigan, and they ended Wisconsin's undefeated season. Alabama doesn't have a Penn State type win. Again, their best win is LSU. There's no top 10 win for Alabama. Wisconsin should still be in the discussion. Really, you go undefeated. Imagine if Alabama went 12-0 this year. They beat Auburn, and then they lost to Georgia in the SEC championship game. All week, what we would have heard from everybody on ESPN and all the sports writers is Alabama's in even if they lose. Alabama would have been number 1 in the poll. They would lose to Georgia, and they would have dropped back to 4, and we wouldn't even be having this discussion. Nobody would care. It would be Clemson 1, Oklahoma, Georgia 2 or 3, however you want to put it, and then Bama 4, and we would be done with it. But since it's Wisconsin, who has a similar situation to what the committee views as Alabama's schedule and Wisconsin's schedule very similarly, Wisconsin's just out of it. Well, if Wisconsin was in it and now they're totally out of it, Ohio State's the reason that they kicked them out. So that's kind of a feather in Ohio State's cap. Whatever that phrase means, I've never understood that. And again, the last pro that I have for Ohio State is they're the most deserving. If you look at it as Ohio State versus Alabama, maybe even versus USC, Ohio State's probably the most deserving team of that bunch. Certainly against Alabama, based on the resume, based on what they've done. Now, if you look at the cons, this is where things get dicey because we don't know what the committee is talking about. Probably still talking about right now with 25 minutes to go. We don't know what criteria they are looking for this year, what secret algorithm these teams have to crack this year, because it's a moving target. So both of their losses were blowouts. The Oklahoma final doesn't indicate that it really wasn't ever in question past mid-second quarter, if I remember correctly, and that was at home. In the same way that that loss kept Oklahoma out of the playoff last year, this loss may end up keeping Ohio State out this year, and that was before they went on the road and lost by 31 points to an Iowa team that finished 7-5. Nick Saban last night made a great point. He said, if we'd have gone to Texas A&M and lost by 31 points, would we be sitting here having this discussion? I don't know, but Alabama also didn't win their conference, so it's kind of not the same argument. Can Ohio State jump from number 8 to number 4 when they beat a team that the committee seemed to have no faith in? I don't know. Can they leapfrog Alabama when they beat a team barely? Not an impressive win. This was not a great game by Ohio State, one for the ages. They didn't beat them 59-0. Wisconsin had a chance at the end of the game to actually win, and they just kept stumbling and didn't quite get it done. But there was a chance Wisconsin was going to win anyway, that they could have won, rather. Is that enough to jump Alabama because Miami lost, Georgia moved up, they'll jump Auburn? Is that enough to jump into the top 4? I don't know. I also have Big Ten being shut out in 2 straight playoffs. I've already talked about that. Clemson's number 1. Remember last year, wouldn't Alabama match up with the Tigers better? I already talked about that. Never been a 2-loss team in the playoff. And this is one that I think the committee is going to be talking about too, because we can say that their job is to get the 4 best teams into the playoff. Theoretically, yes, that is what their job is, but they're all media savvy. They all know what they're doing. So they're also going to look at potential matchups and money and revenue and eyeballs and time slots and all kinds of that stuff that we're not supposed to think that they would ever think about. Do you want to see an Ohio State-Oklahoma rematch? I don't. That doesn't really seem that intriguing to me. I think Oklahoma would drag Ohio State based on what I saw earlier in the season. And Oklahoma is so much better now than they were in September. Is Ohio State so much better than they were in September? I don't know. I really don't know. I didn't get the feeling last night they were when they played Wisconsin. So that's kind of, if I could do a quick rundown. I've been on here for about 40 minutes now. Quick rundown of the pros and cons of both putting Alabama in over Ohio State and Ohio State over Alabama. It's kind of a lose-lose / win-win for the committee, because either way, a fan base is going to be upset. Both teams have a case, but the committee can easily back up whoever they put in with data or saying the eye test. That they can easily do that. So, what about UCF? UCF is undefeated. They are a really good team. If there was an 8-team playoff, there's a chance they would be the number 8 seed, but just can't. I mean, they can't get up there with the Georgias and Clemsons and Oklahomas of the world, especially when the committee just won't rank them in the top 10. So they're not even in the top 10, so they can't jump up. Stupid itchy nose. All right. You guys are feisty. 364 people watching. Thank you guys for being in here. If you haven't already, make sure to hit the like button, the thumbs up, if you're enjoying the stream. That would help me out a lot. And if for some reason you're watching this because you are interested in what's going on in college football and you're not subscribed, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Check out the channel. Hopefully there's videos on here you like. Sorry you missed the entire regular season. Oh my God. My nose. All right. How much higher would UCF be if they played and beat Georgia Tech? Probably a little bit higher for the simple fact that Georgia Tech's a Power 5 team, but not much higher. It's not like they would be number 5 right now and in the middle of the discussion if they had that hurricane game against Georgia Tech back. Yellow Jackets just aren't there this year. David Thompson says Bama's going to come in at 3. So I doubt it. It would be really hard to justify, but they're going to start. The committee, they're going to play around with the idea of matchups. Of Clemson's 1, we'll say Oklahoma's 2. Where do the SEC teams go? Or Ohio State? Do we say Ohio State beat Wisconsin? Let's put them at 3. Get an Oklahoma Ohio State Rose Bowl, where at least there's a Big Ten team in, and then you get Georgia Clemson in the Sugar Bowl since both teams are in the South. I can see that happening. So I do think they're gonna play around with that, but I think it would be hard to justify it not being Clemson 1, Georgia, Oklahoma 2 or 3, whichever way they want to put it, and then the other team that gets in at 4. I hit 3K? Nice. Yeah. I knew I was like 15 away earlier this morning, so that's cool. Yeah, thank you guys. That is all you. I did not subscribe 3,000 times, so thank you. I have a great channel. Thank you, Bradley. I try. How about a 16 playoff where the first 2 teams get byes? I was actually talking about that with my best friend this morning, where he was like, "Yeah, just put USC and Ohio State in as 5 and 6, and let them duke it out, and then it won't matter. Make Alabama and Ohio State play anyway as 4 and 5, and USC and Georgia as 3 and 6, and then it doesn't matter." I think that's an interesting approach. I doubt we'll ever do it, but hey, Trim, welcome to the channel. If you guys just keep typing the exact same thing, I'm going to have to put you in timeout, yo. I don't know what timeout does. I've never actually put anybody in timeout. But I will. Tyler, I'm talking to you. Matt Hart's a 16 playoff. Who will Miami play in the Orange Bowl if Bama makes the playoff? Probably Auburn. And then you're going to have 3 Big Ten teams. You're going to have Wisconsin, Penn State, and Ohio State that are going to be in the New Year's 6. So if Bama makes the playoff, probably I would say Penn State, Miami, and the Orange Bowl. Who do I think will be invited to New York for the Heisman? I definitely think it's going to be Baker Mayfield, Saquon Barkley, Bryce Love. The question is, sometimes they do 3 invites, sometimes they do 5. If they do 3, that'll be it. If they do 5, I would say Mason Rudolph. And the 5th one is weird, because I would put Ronald Jones as the 5th one, but apparently that's not a real thing. They seem to be enamored by Khalil Tate, but I don't think his stats are anywhere near it. Maybe Lamar Jackson is the 5th one. Jay Bama subscribed. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. He wants to know who do I think should be in. So, personally, I never actually answered that. So personally, in the BCS era, I think Ohio State gets in. Maybe that's unfair, because Ohio State would have had 2 losses, and that mattered a lot more in the BCS era. But I think if you go by computers and statistics and algorithms and all that, Ohio State probably gets in. But I actually think, based on eye test, that Alabama is probably better than Ohio State. So I would probably put Alabama in. But yeah, it's tough, because I also respect a conference championship, which Alabama does not have. FAU versus FSU, Independence Bowl? Really? Boy, that would be fun. Let me go to news. Not seeing anything yet online, but that I really hope that wherever you got that is accurate. I would love to see. Man, FAU could really put a stamp in as definitely the 3rd, maybe the 2nd best team in the state. Clemson 1, Georgia 2, Oklahoma 3, Alabama 4, and I'm a Buckeye. Yeah, I graduated from Alabama, for those of you who don't know. And a lot of my Bama friends I've seen online have been saying that they think Ohio State's going to get in. I think Ohio State's going to get in. Or at least I did last night. Now I really, even reading that list, I just kept going back and forth. But I'm glad that there's objective people out there. Notre Dame versus LSU Citrus Bowl. Yes. Yeah, I don't think there's room for Notre Dame in a New Year's Six Bowl. So I think that's the next logical landing spots. And then you're going to have LSU as the highest ranked SEC team, other than Auburn and maybe Bama, depending on what happens. I can see that. Iowa played the game of their life that night. Bucks unraveled late. Yes. And so, I saw somebody on ESPN calling that kind of a fluky win for Ohio State, or for Iowa. Fluky loss for Ohio State's how they put it. Which, one, so, it's still a loss. It's still a really bad loss. And two, so, Clemson had a fluky loss to Syracuse, and everybody on the committee just pretends that never happened. They just kept Clemson, in my opinion, way too high. If you were around and watched those top 25 videos, you know how far I dropped Clemson. That loss was abysmal. That as someone who grew up a Clemson fan, that loss was more embarrassing to me than the West Virginia Orange Bowl loss, to be honest with you. And they, the committee it's wiped clean. So why doesn't Ohio State get a mulligan like that? And if you're going to do that, then why don't they treat Ohio State as a one-loss team and Alabama as an undefeated team, considering they played Auburn at Auburn in a rabid atmosphere and all that? So when you start being like, it's a fluky loss, you can say that to every single team that loses. Yeah, fluked by 31 points. Exactly. Yeah, I don't understand. I don't understand. Wisconsin dominated most every game and beat FAU, Iowa, and Michigan and played Ohio State down to the wire. How are they not in? How are they not at least in the conversation? It's so weird how they're so muted from the conversation. The idea that everybody just seems to be talking about Alabama and Ohio State, even me. But I'm only doing that because of what I'm seeing in the media. I'm seeing from ESPN and from Fox and CBS, these guys are just talking about these two teams. So I do think USC's pretty disqualified at this point, but Wisconsin went undefeated in the regular season. Only one other team did that, and that's UCF. I don't know. And then they lost by 6 points to a team you're talking about putting in the playoff, and they're not even in discussion. 15 is not a blowout. If you're referring to the Oklahoma game, no. The point spread's not a blowout, but if you watch that game, Oklahoma was so clearly the better team. So clearly the better team. Rat poison. Yeah, that's what they are. If Bama gets in, I'm pissed because the committee said TCU didn't get in because they didn't play a conference game. Yeah, so the committee has the right to move the goalpost however and whichever way they want to go, year in and year out, and they can do anything they want. So while I do think, off the top of my head, I think Alabama's the better team over Ohio State, if I just think that, if the committee just thinks things and they don't use any statistics that back up Ohio State's case to put the Buckeyes in, then why even do the playoff committee? Why even have the selection show? Let's just have the NCAA president pick 4 teams that he thinks are the best and would be the most competitive. It's supposed to be this whole back and forth in this committee, 13 teams, no ties, that whole thing. If you're just going to put in the 4 best teams because of a gut feeling you feel like you have, then why even have the committee? Go Tigers, number 1. Has anyone realized that every single team that made the playoffs were a Nike school and is probably going to happen again this year? Oh, that's interesting. My brother is so strangely, like I pick on him, he's so into football uniforms in college specifically that he'll get a kick out of that. Did Rashad Penny get snubbed for the Doak Walker? I don't know. This was a really competitive running back class. There was a lot of really good running backs kind of at the top of the heap this year. I'm not talking about draft picks or anything like that, but just as college running backs. And they could only have 3 as finalists. So I don't know. If I was him, I would certainly feel pretty pissed. I would certainly feel like I did everything I could. I mean, I know it doesn't matter, but he beat Bryce Love when their teams played each other. Bucks defense would do better this year against Clemson. Yes. But how would Ohio State's offense do against a better Clemson defense this year? RE, better team. That Iron Bowl loss hurts then. Bama didn't seem to be in it at all. By that measure, can't see how they get in. Right. But you could also say that about Ohio State for large chunks of the Iowa game. So Auburn was clearly the better team in that Iron Bowl when they beat Alabama, but then Georgia was so clearly the better team in the SEC championship yesterday against that same Auburn team. Not really that same Auburn team. They had a lot of injuries on the defense during the game. Kerryon Johnson was not right, but the team, Georgia blew them out, especially the second half. They really clamped down. What rank will Georgia be? Number 3? I think so. I think Oklahoma's going to be ahead of them just because they were always at the top of the heap, more consistent this year. But Georgia has the better loss because Iowa State, which turned out to be not the most embarrassing loss in the world like it looked like when Oklahoma first had it, but Georgia got redemption by beating Auburn again and beating them soundly. So maybe they slip Georgia up to number 2, but all that changes is the color of the jerseys they wear in the Rose Bowl. Although Kelly Bryant said that 95% of Clemson, I think, wants to go to the Rose Bowl, which I would too, but I don't think it's up to them. FAU versus Florida State in the Independence Bowl, confirmed, no joke. Nice. That'll be fun. That'll be really fun. I wish Jimbo was still there for it. I wish it was Jimbo versus Lane. Do you think a 6-6 team should play an FCS team in a mediocre bowl game? Nah. Let's let the 6-6 teams go. New Mexico State got bowl eligible, broke a 57-year streak of not being bowl eligible, which is crazy. Jacob Jansen, $2 super chat. I appreciate it, friend. I think you might be the first one. I need to double check. Boomer Sooner will win the national championship. Oklahoma's defense is coming on at the right time. So Oklahoma's defense is starting to look better than they have all year, which is certainly going to help. We got a super chat. What bowl does Penn State go to? I kind of think that depends, Fletcher, on who goes to the playoff. So if Alabama goes to the playoff, I think it'll probably be the Orange Bowl against Miami. But if Ohio State goes, I think it'll probably be in the Cotton Bowl against TCU. So it kind of depends. 5 minutes away. I know. I'm actually kind of surprised. Do I have this on ESPN too? Well, I about messed up. I had it on ESPN too because they were talking college football, and all of a sudden I was like, wait, they didn't end their NFL show? Oh, I almost missed the entire thing because I was on ESPN too. Boy, that would have been stupid. Is Malzahn to Arkansas a lock with that loss? I don't know about a lock, but if I was an Arkansas fan yesterday, I was dancing in my underwear in my living room because I think he wants to go to Auburn. Auburn can pay more. He already has his guys in at Auburn. It would theoretically be an easier job because he's going to be in the same division as Arkansas anyway. But yeah, it'll be it's way more likely than it was 2 days ago. Georgia is a one-dimensional run offense. If defense steps up and Oklahoma gets ahead early, it's over. There's a chance. Georgia can't keep up with Oklahoma. I know that. If Oklahoma's up 17-0, it'd be a lot for Georgia to come back and win. And, you know, with Jake Fromm, I think he was 9 of 10 in the first half against Auburn. Kirby Smart, all he did was take the Alabama model and move it to Georgia. Have a good defense, run the ball, and have a game manager. I wonder how long it'll be before we start hearing Jake Fromm called a game manager as quarterback. Am I going to stream the show? I'm going to stream me just like this, talking about the show. I can't put the show on. I actually have my TV on mute because ESPN will take my channel down if they hear that. What bowl game does Michigan State go to? I'm not entirely certain. I haven't gone down the rabbit hole of the bowls yet. I've been so focused on these. I could see them in the Capital One Bowl, off the top of my head. Nobody else thinks that Auburn has to be ahead of Alabama. At this point, you're starting to look at 3 losses versus 1. And that changes the dynamic. 2 losses early. You know, Clemson was the second week of the season. And then LSU, I think, was September 30th. Right there at the end of September. You can forgive. 3 losses with 1 just happening. They're going to move them down below Alabama. Do you think Taggart will go to Florida State? And who will be his replacement? I don't know if he'll go. I selfishly was kind of excited to see what he would do at Oregon, and I kind of hope he hangs out there. If he leaves, I don't know who the replacement at Oregon would be. And if he doesn't go to Florida State, I'm not really sure. I'm pretty sure they're focusing in on Taggart, so I'm not even sure who the other candidates are for Florida State. I've heard Michigan versus South Carolina rematch in the Outback Bowl. Yeah, I wonder how many times they're going to show that Clowney hit. About 1 billion. Oh, just got another super chat. The Purge Mercenary. Sounds like a very family-friendly name. Ohio State deserves the toilet bowl. Who knows? They might get what they consider the equivalent of it here in just a second. So yeah, I have the TV on mute. I can't hear what any of the guys on ESPN are saying, but they are cutting over to it right now. So if there is a really long delay in sound, I apologize, especially if you're watching this on the replay and there's just no sound. There's 511 people in this chat. Holy crap. I think the most I'd ever had at one time was 156. So hello. Hello to 1/6 of my entire YouTube audience. It's nice to see all of you here at one time. Once again, real quick, as we're waiting for the top 4 to be revealed here in just a minute, make sure if you're enjoying the stream to give it a thumbs up. That really helps the channel, and it really helps me know that you're enjoying the live stream. And if you are not subscribed and just happen to find this channel and this live stream for some reason, definitely hit the subscribe button if you feel so obliged, and come back after the live stream and poke around on the channel. I have videos pretty much about every single Power 5 team at this point, and I'm going to work the rest of this year If you have a team in the FBS, you will have a video about your team in 2018 for show. Reese Davis in a nice blue suit and brown shoes, standing in front of a board. I wish I could do picture-in-picture and put this up so we could all watch it at the same time, but I'm pretty sure Walt Disney, one of his heirs, would come and strangle me at my house. All right, he's just talking to the camera. Dude, stop talking to the camera. Just show me the people. A year ago, I went to the Florida-Alabama SEC championship game, and I was actually driving back from Atlanta, and I pulled over into a Wendy's parking lot and watched this on my app. So I'm much happier being here with 544 people streaming. That's really cool. Oh, they're showing this stupid montage. Just come on, man. People are trying to watch their NFL pregame show. At least feel bad for them. At least hurry up. Don't show Pitt. Why are you showing Pitt? It cracks me up, some of the names when they do that flipboard thing. Some of the team names they slide in there. They'll be flipping it and they'll just be like NC State. NC State. When were they ever in talks of this? They'll be flipping. They'll just be like Ole Miss. Ole Miss. They can't even go to a bowl this year. Showing the dumb committee just hanging out, not talking about stuff, not making decisions, just looking at each other in a room. Oh, man. Jeff Long. He got fired as the athletic director at Arkansas. And Feinbaum made sure to definitely point that out earlier when he was arguing with Heather Dinich. He was like, yeah, Jeff Long, it's his only job now. He got fired as athletic director. He doesn't have anything else to do. Oh, Clemson's got a pizza party going. I was at the Clemson pizza party 2015 at the field. This one is just 30 large pizzas in their complex. It's more than 30. I'm really hungry. Oh my God, they got these reporters all over the country. I don't care. Did they do all this last year? I swear they just announced it last year. Ugh. Georgia beat the bird crap out of Auburn. I see what you did there. I wonder how much of a motivational factor that quote from Malzahn was for Georgia. I bet it. Kirby Smart brought it up, so clearly it mattered. I'm sorry if you're watching this on mobile or something and there's a delay, but I'm gonna announce it whenever I find out. Oh my Lord, just get to it. I'm sick of people just sitting around talking. I watched so much commentary last night. Read so many articles. I just kind of wanted to feel like I was getting into the committee's mind. I didn't, because they don't know what they're... Not that they don't know what they're doing, they don't know what they want. They just said, we don't have an answer from the committee? Are you effing kidding me? Did they really say that the committee doesn't know yet? Georgia doesn't know what winning a national title is like. Actually, they do. Some of the things that the Booker looks like a milk dud. So some of the things that the spam filter in this chat catches is really weird. Somebody just listed off their teams, but they put commas, but didn't space out the teams, and it was like, is this okay? Yeah, it's fine. All right. See, I can't hear, so I need the chat to let me know what they're saying. if they're I can't believe that they don't have an answer. What a cop-out. I wonder if it's like political grandstanding. If this is their way of filibustering. Where they're like, listen, we know who we want. But if we stay in here for like 30 extra minutes, it'll make it seem like we really just pounded out the numbers and we just really couldn't tell. And finally, we just had, by a 7-6 vote, we had to get somebody. I wonder if this is like grandstanding. They're saying nothing, Booker said. Ugh. Subtitles? I'm not gonna do that. I've never put subtitles on ever. I have Uverse. I just don't even know how to. I probably could do that through the TV, but I'm kind of like, the way I'm positioned is I'm just kind of anchored in this corner, and like I have a stool and some cables here, and like a stool and some cables here, and a light, and I'm good. I'll just keep talking to y'all. I feel like right now, those 5 guys on ESPN, Reese Davis and crew talking, are like the landscaping guy at the Big Ten Championship last night. That's what I feel like. I feel like they're just like, we just want to get through this. Please stop watching us. Can we just get the top 4? Please. Oh my God, we don't know what to say. People are asking for my top 4. All 578 people watching. What up? If I had to do a top 4, based on gut feeling alone, I would probably do Clemson 1, Oklahoma 2, Georgia 3, FAU 4. I just think the Owls are really, surging at the right time. Haven't lost a conference game. I think FAU 4. Let's see what Lane can do. No, like I've been saying throughout the stream, I keep going back and forth as well. I understand why the committee's doing it. I just wonder if it's... I just don't trust them. I feel like they all have ulterior motives other than finding the best teams. But if you're going best team, I would say Alabama. If you're going most deserving, meaning conference championship, I would say Ohio State at 4. 1 Kansas, 2 Baylor, 3 Illinois, 4 North Carolina. That sounds right. Sounds about right. Top 4 teams revealed at 12:30. Oh my lord. Man, I did a whole hour live stream where I did all the pros and cons. Jerks. Alright. Trollololol. That's exactly right. What bowl do I think Florida State will go to? A lot of people in the chat have been saying they've accepted the Independence Bowl bid against FAU. Did they just say 6,000 pizzas? Oh my God. They're in like the complex. It looked like, maybe I'm wrong, but it looked like it was just like players and coaches' families. 6,000 slices. 6,000 pizzas. They're releasing them at 12:30. What would your 8-team playoff be? Okay, well, let's do that. So, 8-team playoff. I would probably have... I'm going to do a video. I've done this 2 years in a row now. I'll probably do it this spring. I'll go by the top 8 of what they do and kind of do a video talking about what I think may have happened. Like if 1 and 8 played. It kind of ends up being the national championship game we got. I think the last 2 years I did that, it was that. But if I had a top 8, I would have Clemson 1, Oklahoma 2, Georgia 3, Alabama 4, Ohio State 5, Wisconsin 6, USC 7, and UCF 8. And I know I'm leaving off Penn State, but I figure we'll get the Pac-12 champ in there. We have all Power 5 champions, and then I'll give UCF a shot. Because Penn State was never super impressive down the stretch when it mattered most. So I figure I'll give UCF the shot. So that would be Clemson versus UCF, Oklahoma versus USC. Let's do it by bowls. Clemson versus UCF, we'll do that in the Peach Bowl, right? Oklahoma, USC, we'll do that at Fiesta Bowl. Wisconsin, Georgia, we'll do that in I guess we'll do that in the Cotton Bowl, and we'll do Alabama, Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. Why not? 12:30. What do you think will happen with Miami? Miami is going to the Orange Bowl. So the way that the ACC's tie-in with the Orange Bowl is they get the ACC champion unless the ACC champion is in the playoff. If that's the case, then the next best, highest ranked, however you want to look at it, ACC team is in the Orange Bowl. That would be Miami. They were both the highest ranked team, and they lost the ACC championship. So it will be Miami. The question is, who will they play? So will they play Penn State? Probably if Ohio State gets in. Yeah, no, if Alabama gets in. Will they play... they'll play Alabama if Ohio State gets in. Ooh, when I time people out, it tells you for how long? For 5 minutes. Wisconsin to Fiesta? I think so. I think they'll play USC in the Fiesta Bowl. Clemson does suck, though. They lost to Syracuse. Well, they don't suck. They deserve to be in the playoff, but that loss to Syracuse it's the worst loss I've seen Clemson have under Dabo Swinney. I mean, that was an embarrassing loss. I didn't answer your question, Brian. I'm sorry. There's a lot of questions. But if you'd have put a question there, I could have seen it then. JT Barrett is so mediocre. Yeah, it's the same kind of feeling I have about Jalen Hurts of Alabama. Like, if they were 1 or 2 degrees more, their offenses would be almost unstoppable. But the quarterback play is what kind of holds them back. Do I think that Penn State will make the top 4? No, I do not think that Penn State will make the top 4. Oh, Brian, I wasn't talking to you. Yeah, if you're talking to people in the chat, which I love you guys talking. I don't even mind smack talk, really, as long as it stays within a normal amount. Because YouTube, something I found out about comment sections and stuff, this YouTube demonetization, if you guys know anything about what's going on, some of the comments in YouTube comment sections because of hashtag ElsaGate is triggering the demonetization. And I guarantee it's going to be stuff in the chat too. So as long as it's not crazy, I'm good. But if you're talking to each other, just put a little @ and their name. And that way they can see it easier too. All I'm saying is it's better to have lost to Iowa on the road than Syracuse on the road. Guitar Player 6? Yes. But then you also factor in losing by double digits to Oklahoma at home in a game that it never really felt like you were in. So that compounds it if you're comparing it. Tua is better than Jalen? Maybe. They both seem very similar, but what we've seen of Tua has been in a backup role against backup DBs and stuff, so it'll be interesting. Next Florida State head coach, I do think it's probably going to be Willie Taggart. If he says no, I'm not entirely certain what direction Florida State wants to go. It feels, everything I've seen feels like that they are going after Taggart. What do you guys think about Jimbo going to Texas A&M? Do you think he'll do well there? What do I think about Dwayne Haskins? What we saw of him in the Michigan game, he looked very good. I had somebody in the live stream Thursday ask me if I would rather have him in there or JT Barrett against Wisconsin. And I picked Barrett because of all the like leadership, and he's senior and he's been there before. But I said in that live stream, if JT Barrett was 99% instead of 100%, I'm putting Dwayne Haskins on. What bowl do you think USC will play in? I'm fairly confident they are going to play in the Fiesta Bowl. It's nearby. The Rose Bowl is not an option because of the playoff. They are looking at Charlie Strong at Florida State. I can see that. Kaylin Gonzalez. I don't know if she's in here. She's a UCF student, and she's a big fan of UCF, and she's in a lot of these comment sections and stuff. And she said that, I mean, it's a rival school, so take that with a grain of salt, I guess. But she was hearing that Charlie Strong wanted to get out of USF because there was no fan support. And my best friend did grad school at USF, and he said football there's a joke. Nobody cares. So I can totally understand that. So if you're going from like Louisville and Texas and Florida to USF, you may want to bounce out to Florida State. This shows up at 12:30. Yeah, it was supposed to be at 12, but the committee is either they don't know what they're doing. Which I don't think it's that, just for the record, but they don't know what they're doing, or they're politicking to soften the blow and make it seem like they really just tried so hard to get the teams in. They just couldn't. They just had to work it out. Or they are just sitting around going, I don't know, what do you got? I don't know. Oh man, we are gonna look really dumb if we don't pick a team soon. Most powerful man in college football, the tech guy that does the graphics. He knows before anyone. Oh man, like if you had that kind of power, wouldn't it be fun? Wouldn't it be fun at the 4 spot to just throw in like North Texas? Just like throw some team in and see what Reese Davis says. Do you think Idaho will be able to compete for an FCS national championship year one? I don't think they're going to be able to because they have way more scholarship players than everybody else in the FCS. So they have to like weed down. So I think, I may be wrong on this, but in the same way that like Georgia Southern, their first year in the Sun Belt, they couldn't win the Sun Belt title even though they went undefeated in the conference. There's a gradual up and a gradual down. So I think it's 2 years before they can get in the playoffs. I think in 2018, they have a regular season and they're done. And then in 2019, they can compete for the Big Sky Conference Championship. And then in 2020, they're back to full-time FCS. But I'm not sure about that. But in 2019, 2020, I don't see why not, based on the experience that they have. Their schedule is weak. It is what it is. Bama gets no excuse. They scheduled Mercer a week before Iron Bowl. Cupcake of all cupcakes. So, if you look at their schedules, Ohio State's non-conference schedules was Oklahoma, Big 12 champ, 12-1. Army, 8-3. Strangely, a good win for them. I doubt they thought that when they scheduled it. And then UNLV, who lost to Howard to begin the year, but almost became bowl eligible at 5-7. All of those are better than Mercer, and it's not like, and the Florida State game was supposed to be Alabama's great buoy, right? It was supposed to make everything raise up, and Florida State, after DeAndre Francois, they just couldn't do it. So, not only did Ohio State not schedule an FCS team, they ended up with the conference championship playing 10 conference games. Alabama only played 8. Do you think most of the eligible 7 MAC teams get a bowl? I don't know. So you have a lot of CUSA teams. I'm not sure all of them get in. what did we end up with? Did we end up with there's 78 bowl spots. I think we ended up with 81 bowl teams. So 3 are going to get left out. Florida State is going to the Independence Bowl, so it won't be them. Not that we ever thought it probably would, but some teams are going to get left out. So between the MAC and the CUSA, because I think teams like in the Mountain West will probably get preferential treatment. But that's based on nothing. That's just something I feel. MAC and probably the CUSA. So in the MAC, maybe a Buffalo doesn't get to go since they were the last to get bowl eligible. And in the CUSA, I can't remember off the top of my head what was the last team or two in there to get bowl eligible. I don't know how they judge that. I don't know if they judge it by geography, fan bases, wins. I don't know how they do that. All right, they got a split screen with David Pollock, even though they're probably looking across ESPN lot at each other. I wish since we have this delay, they could just go ahead and tell us who the New Year's Six games are. That would be if like you're gonna stall for time or whatever. You know, I guess you can if you don't know who the 4th and 5th teams are. Dumb. So it's 12:23. So theoretically, we have 7 minutes until they tell us, unless they push that crap back again. Ooh. Do you think Taggart would leave Oregon for Florida State? He has a quarterback returning. Yeah, I think he would. It's going to be more money. He's probably more familiar with the Florida recruiting trail than Oregon, even though he's been making inroads for at least a year now. Selfishly, I would probably stay at Oregon because I feel like, in part, the fans helped drive Jimbo out of Tallahassee. Just after this one bad year, he was getting in like verbal fights with fans leaving the field and stuff. So I feel like Oregon is a much less pressured job. And you don't have to play Clemson every year. But, to each his own. There was a lot of talk about whether Chip Kelly, for instance, should have stayed at UCLA or gone to UCLA or gone to Florida. And I would have picked UCLA as well. So it kind of depends on the coach. All right, I see the top 4 lit up. Is it time? Is it time? Are they teasing? I bet they're teasing. They're just showing the stupid board. Oh my god. All right, saw Dabo, so no one time. Can you guys hear that? No, you can't. I bet you can't. And this microphone's pretty sensitive. I've turned the volume up to where I can vaguely hear it. So hopefully you guys cannot hear it. Commercials. Who is watching the DirecTV commercial right now? I am watching the DirecTV commercial right now. The first one they did like that, where that I can't remember if it's a guy or a girl, but they do the oh my god, paper cut across like their tongue. I don't know why that needed to be in there. Everything else is fine. I can take all the other goofy stuff that happened in those dumb commercials. How about turn the camera to the TV? Nope. Can't do that. Reese Davis will come to my house and strangle me to death. Huge copyright. Will Oregon play Louisville in a bowl game? I doubt it. I That would be fun. I don't know if the ACC and Pac-12, maybe in the Sun Bowl. I think that might be the only crossover those two conferences have. It was the boosters who drove Jimbo out at Florida State. Well, the president officially said they just couldn't match Texas A&M, but I was like, why is he even talking to Texas A&M? Clearly something happened. Oh, great. Now that I can like hear the TV just slightly, I keep thinking they're coming back. You know, when you have a package out for delivery for the day through like Amazon or something, and it's like a Saturday and you're at home, and you just kind of sit on the couch and keep peeking through the blinds. I feel like that's what I'm doing right now. I'm like, just... UCF is playing Alabama in basketball today. That's kind of like a playoff, right? Probably not. How many more debacles do you think it will take for NCAA to make the playoffs an 8-team affair? I think only one. I think the first time an SEC team is left out of the playoff, it'll go to 8. So I don't believe in all of like the SEC bias talk, but I believe in that one. That if the SEC gets left out, they're done. Or if for some reason 5 Power 5 conference champions go 12, 13, and 0, they'll have to expand it. But that's not very likely to happen. Oh, great, another stupid video package. We've only waited 30 minutes. All right, 507 people. That's really cool. I'm really glad you guys are with me. Thank you. You didn't have to be. See, criteria used to rank teams. Conference championships. Strength of schedule. No specific metric. What does that even mean? Head-to-head competition, if applicable. It never is. Outcomes of common opponents without incentivizing margin of victory and other relevant factors. That tells me nothing. It tells me nothing about what they look for. They really are just like, yeah, do the best you can with what you got. They don't really have any guidelines. Does UCF deserve a shot? Not in a 14 playoff. I appreciate them going undefeated, but in a 14 playoff, not quite. In an 18 playoff, I'd be raising hell if they weren't in. They were not in, I mean. LOL, what criteria? Exactly. Florida State fan, thank you. Do you think the NCAA will ever take control of the FBS National Championship instead of letting ESPN and other sponsors control it? Kevin, that's an interesting question. I may be wrong in the thing I'm about to say, but I want to say the NCAA does not officially recognize national champions at the FBS level. I know that sounds really weird, and I think that they don't officially recognize it in the way they do with other playoffs. The more I say that, the more I hear it, the less likely that sounds. But I don't think officially the NCAA has anything to do with the playoff in the way we're talking about. But I do appreciate your hatred of corporate interests controlling the game. I also don't. Finally. All right, here we go, guys. Here we go. We got the 6 graphic up. Only the graphic man knows. Clemson, 12-1, number 1 in the country. I assume that would happen. I assume they're going to go to number 2 next. I can't remember how they did this last year. If they did like 1, 2, 3, and then 6, 5, 4. I think that's the most suspense. All right, stop talking about Clemson being number 1. Just show them. I know why Clemson's number 1. I also watch football. I assume Oklahoma will be number 2. Remember, guys, if you are enjoying the live stream, give it a thumbs up real quick. Just hit that thumbs up. It tells YouTube that my channel is worth spending money and resources on. They're still talking about Clemson. Dude, I can't hear what they're saying. Remember, it's like it's enough to where I can tell a person's talking, but I can't hear any words because I don't want this wonderful microphone to pick it up. Oklahoma 2. Okay? That makes sense. Are we going to spend 5 minutes talking about Oklahoma being a number 2? I hope not. Oklahoma is in. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, Oklahoma is in. I had no doubt they would be in. I assume Georgia will be here at number 3. That's gonna be a fun Rose Bowl. Oklahoma, Georgia. I love matchups that don't happen very often. Have they ever played before? I made a video a year and some change ago about 10 games we've never seen, and I want to say Oklahoma, Georgia was one of them. I might be wrong about that. As if I don't have anything better to do. Let me check this out real quick. They have never played. Oklahoma and Georgia have never played a game. So if Georgia is number 3, it'll be the very first matchup ever, and it'll take place in the freaking Rose Bowl and the college football playoff. Stupid. Stupid nose. Itchy nose. Yeah, Oklahoma and Georgia have never played each other. They will New Year's Day 2018. 12-1 Georgia. They're at number 3. $678 people watching. Holy cow. Hello, everybody. This is 20% of my YouTube audience. Hello. All right, so we got Clemson at 1, Oklahoma at 2, Georgia at 3. Those two will meet for the very first time ever. That is really cool. I can't remember if they do 4-5-6 or 6-5-4. I can't hear them talk, so I don't know. I feel like a bad host. I want to look at the camera and talk to you guys and take comments. I can't not see this happen. Yeah, I mean, I'm so nervous. I hope Bama makes it. Number 4, Ohio State. Watching from Germany. Hey, what's up? What's up way over there? I swear, if Bama's at number 4, Ohio State, come on. I'm excited about that matchup. Yeah, the Rose Bowl is going to be really fun. It'll be interesting to see what Kirby Smart does against Baker Mayfield. Because when Alabama played... they have USC up there. Alabama, Ohio State, and USC is 4, 5, and 6. How about that? I want to say USC was 12th last week. So they moved USC up 6 spots for beating a team that they've already beaten who was already ranked behind them. How about that? Boy, what if all of this stalling was to put USC up there at number 4? Can you imagine the fan bases of Alabama and Ohio State flipping out because USC jumped them up to number 4 after beating Stanford? Oh boy. Oh boy, you want to talk about needing Secret Service for some needing Secret Service for some committee members. All right, here we go. They got the graphic back up for me. Alabama is 4. There you go. Alabama is 4. Kirk Herbstreit, I think it's Kirk Herbstreit, is gone from his seat. Alabama's 4. Wow. So Ohio State is going to be 5 and USC is going to be 6. I kind of thought Wisconsin might be there at 6 and USC at 7, but... So they decided to go for best team over most deserving. Get ready for a onslaught of SEC bias as they get 2 SEC teams into the playoff for the very first time. Alabama not winning a conference championship, only having one loss, their loss being to the team that lost in their conference championship. You're going to hear a lot about SEC bias. You're going to hear a lot of angry fans, a lot of angry Ohio State fans, as they are in my feed right now. A lot of angry Ohio State fans. Oh, wait. Wisconsin was 6? What the hell? Why'd you show USC's resume then? That was weird. All right. Wow. So we get Clemson, Bama 2. And we get the very first ever matchup between Oklahoma and Georgia. No matter who wins, you have storylines for days for each of those 4 teams in the national championship. Wow, yeah. So it'll be Clemson and Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, Oklahoma and Georgia in the Rose Bowl, it looks like. I know there's a lot of cursing and there's a lot of things that it's catching that I'm not showing because it's going by too fast, so I apologize. Ohio State got screwed. Ohio State shouldn't have gotten killed by Iowa. That's the thing. So regardless of who got left out, they have no one to blame but themselves. Auburn was the better team in the Alabama game, in the Iron Bowl. But Alabama, it never felt like they really were themselves. They had dumb penalties. They had some weird fumbles. They had a couple of delay of games, some things that Nick Saban coach teams don't normally have. Ohio State, they at times didn't even look like they belonged on the field against Oklahoma. Then they go to Iowa City and get blown out by a Hawkeyes team that finished 7-5. Either way, whoever was going to end up at number 5, in this case Ohio State, has nobody to blame but themselves. Conference championships should mean more. They don't. They don't. Alabama played Mercer. Clemson 41, Bama 10. That's probably not going to happen. The point spread right now, I think I saw, was Alabama by 3.5 over Clemson. We'll see. We'll see if that changes over the next month. Ohio State should have kept it close against Iowa. Ohio State should have beaten Iowa. Sonny. They theoretically, if they were a team that was in this kind of position, they should have beaten Iowa. Clemson should have beaten Syracuse too, but with Clemson's resume, they have 10 wins over teams in the top 50 in the FPI or something. Conference championships mean nothing anymore. They only mean as much as the team that wins them, I guess. $673 people. It's dropping. Now that we know who the top 4 is, it's dropping a little bit. But I do appreciate everybody hanging out here. Again, if you are new to the channel for some reason, make sure to hit the subscribe button and poke around at some of the videos on the channel. Hopefully you enjoy it and become part of the community here. If you have not hit the thumbs up button, considering it's 3-1 as far as views versus thumbs up, hit that because it does trigger YouTube's almighty algorithm and tells them that I'm a good channel. All right. Welcome back to the BCS corruption. Yeah, it's less computers, more people. Ohio State got robbed. Ohio State is this year's Penn State. Yeah, it is interesting. Ohio State seemed to reap the benefits of this argument last year, and now they're the victims of the argument this year. That's not irony, but it is something like irony. I understand, but Alabama's schedule was easy and was fed by the committee. Was fed by the committee. Bias. Hashtag Dog Nation. I don't think Alabama will beat Clemson, but I'd be hell if we had Georgia versus Alabama for the national championship. Yeah, another all SEC national championship. By South Carolina mapping. Ohio State plays who now? So I assume Wisconsin will go to the Fiesta Bowl. I would think Ohio State would go to the Cotton Bowl now and Penn State to the Orange Bowl. So it may be Ohio State TCU in the Cotton Bowl. So conference champ versus non-conference champ. Why is USC so low? The only thing I can think is that the Notre Dame loss was bad. The Washington State loss just got worse and worse as the year went on. But if you look at their opponents that they've beaten, kind of compared to Alabama and Ohio State, they're actually better. So we only know the top 6. At least that's all I know because I can't hear anything. And the only graphic I'm seeing is 1 through 6. So I'm not sure. Maybe USC 7. Because they put USC, Ohio State, and Alabama's resumes up beside each other and then put Wisconsin 6. Okay. Did Auburn get played by Bama? That is a difficult question to answer because they played better than Bama in the game, but Bama losing was actually the best thing for the Tide because what if they'd have gone in and beaten, if they'd have gone into the SEC championship and lost to Georgia, then Ohio State would be in because Alabama would have lost again and Auburn would have lost again to the Tide. There's a lot of angry people. It is holding a whole lot of y'all's chats. So I'm not trying to censor you for absolutely no reason. Riots in Columbus. I'm curious. I know they had reporters there. I wonder if they have cameras kind of in the middle of campus because I assume Columbus is a tinderbox right now. Congrats on 3K subs. Thank you. I appreciate it. We were like 15 less than 3K before this stream, so thank you. Ohio State and USC got screwed. I think maybe not where they're placed, but I certainly think Wisconsin should have been at least bigger part of this conversation. Pac-12 is garbage. Oklahoma versus Georgia, Alabama versus Clemson. You know Clemson used to be in the SEC and Oklahoma should be. Clemson was never in the SEC. South Carolina used to be in the ACC. I don't think Oklahoma belongs in the SEC, personally. I'm curious. So with the comparison of the 2015 Buckeyes, would it show a bias towards Bama if they got in? Would it show a bias towards Bama if they got in? I'm not sure. The 2015 Buckeyes only lost to Michigan State. Michigan State only lost by 1 point to Nebraska. Beat undefeated Iowa in the Big Ten Championship on a late drive and got in, and there just wasn't enough room for another team. You had SEC champ, ACC champ, Big 12 champ, and Big 10 champ. So I'm not quite sure what you mean. Would it show a bias towards Bama if they got in? Not sure what that means. Hopefully we are fully healthy versus Clemson. I know Deion Hamilton is out for the year, but the rest of the defense, and that's another thing, like Alabama not being in a conference championship game gives them an extra week to heal, where Clemson, I mean, you could make a joke if you wanted to, but Clemson had to play a really tough Miami team. There was a bunch of big shots in that game. Hello, Renee Knight. I don't know if you had a question, but all I saw was you say, talk to me. Auburn got so played. Roll Tide. Mayfield or Barkley? I assume that's a Heisman Trophy question. Now, who would I rather have on my team? So I would say Mayfield. Alabama's Mercer win should be the deciding factor. Yeah, Ohio State, if the shoe was on the other foot and Ohio State had played, I don't know any not North Dakota State. If they'd have played, I don't know, Chattanooga, right? Some FCS team, and Alabama had played 10 SEC games, and I don't know, if Alabama had played 10 SEC games, that would have been a much bigger factor. Way more people would be talking about the fact that Alabama had to play more conference games against quality opponents than Ohio State did, who only had to play 8 conference games and play an FCS team. So, if the shoe was on the other foot in this case, the shoe was on the other foot, I do think there would be a much bigger deal by the networks of talking about how the SEC had to play more conference games. Ohio State played 10 Big Ten games. 10. And against 10 different opponents, because they did not play Wisconsin during the regular season. BS, money runs. Kirby Holcutt explaining why committee chose Bama over Ohio State right now. I can't hear it. That's the problem. Because if I turn it up too loud, it's going to get caught up in the mic. If it gets caught up in the mic, ESPN will, come after my channel. And I'm not kidding when I say that. How can you count Rutgers as a good game? That's a fair point, too. So you have those 3 straight games. You had Rutgers, Maryland, and Nebraska, all 4-8 for Ohio State. But, Alabama played an Ole Miss team that wasn't great. It's kind of pathetic. They played Tennessee. They played Vanderbilt. So you could kind of count that the same way, right? After this year, they need to expand the playoffs to at least 8 teams. I totally agree with you. I've wanted an 8-team playoff since they announced we were going to have playoffs. I thought it was ridiculous. Heard loud and clear. Play garbage teams and get in after sitting out your conference championship game. We now, not only is there a precedent. Not only is there a precedent with Ohio State doing it last year, now Alabama did it this year. So if you have a big-time rivalry game at the end of the year, say you're next year, Georgia, undefeated, they're not going to throw any games. But if Dan Mullen brings up Florida the way I expect him to, in a couple of years, Kirby Smart versus Dan Mullen in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, the loser of that game may end up being better than the winner of that game, who may go on to represent the East. It's no longer just one team this one time. It's now 2 years in a row. At 3, it becomes a pattern. And it may get to the point to where if they don't put in conference champions, it almost is to the point to where you'd be better off not even playing in one. Because look, you got Ohio State last year and Alabama this year in. Making this an SEC playoff leads back to the demise of the BCS when LSU played Alabama. Possibly, but I would flip that and ask you, what about in 2015 if Ohio State and Michigan State had gotten in the playoff instead? We only say that because we know, because a lot of people feel like Alabama elbowed out Oklahoma State, or rather the media, led by ESPN and the BCS, elbowed out Oklahoma State in favor of Alabama. But if it happened to another conference, I feel like there wouldn't be as much pushback as there is against the SEC. Except conference championship games mean money for the conference. Oh, absolutely. I'm saying it would almost be, if your team is 6-0, 7-0, 8-0, and you lose a game to a team in your division, I wouldn't even worry about it anymore. Obviously, you're fans. You don't want to lose. But I wouldn't even worry about it, because we've just seen 2 years in a row now teams getting in without even being a champion of anything. It's not even they went into their division championship, or they won the division championship, went into the conference title game, and then lost in a close game to a really tough team. But they were, say, Wisconsin. They were undefeated the whole year. We're going to credit that. We're going to put them in. At least they were the champion of something. Alabama ain't the champion of nothing. They ain't the state champion. They ain't the division champion. They ain't the conference champion. So the committee is working on dangerous ground, because I can already tell you next year what's going to happen. Mark my words. Next year, what's going to happen is you are going to have 5 one-loss conference champions. Let me rephrase that. You're going to have 4 one-loss conference champions, and you're going to have like a 2-loss team from the SEC, and they're going to put the 2-loss team from the SEC in. Something weird like that's going to happen, where they're going to have to make a really uncomfortable decision that they don't want to. 2-loss non-conference champion over a 1-loss conference champion, because that kind of a precedent is set. They can just say, well, we think 2-loss Alabama is better than all of these 1-loss teams that are vying for that 4th spot. So, well, here's a thing. Somebody said something about getting rid of divisions. What if instead of getting rid of divisions, conferences, based on this kind of information, switch to the Big 12 model? Not where they play a round robin, but the 2 best teams. For instance, the last few years, it probably in the ACC would have been Florida State versus Clemson, even though they're in the same division. You just have divisions to keep rivalries localized, and then you put statistically the 2 best teams in. And that way you can eliminate some of this from happening. I don't know. Do you think that Alabama should be in the playoffs even though they literally beat no one this year? That is going to be the question that will be attached to this playoff forever. So, I said it at the very beginning of this broadcast. The committee is in a lose-lose, win-win situation. They can rationalize either way they wanted to, either way. The question is always going to be, no matter what, even if Alabama goes on and wins the national championship, it's still going to be of, should they have even been in there in the first place? I still think on a neutral site, Alabama beats Ohio State. We'll never know now, at least for this year. So it was just like I framed it at the beginning of this live stream. Best team or better team versus most deserving. And I think maybe this is in response to the BCS system, where it would have been the most deserving team 10 times out of 10, theoretically. You can once again bring up the Oklahoma State, 2004 Auburn. There are things in there, but for the most part, it was the best team statistically. Most deserving, I mean. And I think this is their way of saying we're different. We're not the BCS. We're going to put the better team in. Based on eyeball test alone. Yeah. I'm not on coke or anything. I just have a really itchy nose. It gets really itchy. I guess it's the light or something. It gets really itchy when I'm on this live stream. I feel like I mean, I've been doing this for 2 hours now. I haven't done a bump of coke yet. I don't have the money for coke. All right. Well, that was a very proactive live stream. They're talking to Dabo now. I need to get off and go process this. We got I think I saw somebody in here say the New Year's Six Bowls are going to be released at 3. Is that correct? I don't know. And then the rest of the bowl selection show should be at 7 o'clock tonight, I think. This was a really cool live stream. Thank you all for showing up and hanging out and doing this with me. It was really neat to be able to do that. I'm going to try to do it again next year. That is a long time away. I don't know the next live stream I'll do. I had been doing them on Mondays as kind of a recap of the weekend and trying to do them on Thursdays. But with no football for the last little bit, I don't know. maybe I'll excuse me, maybe I'll do a live stream to kind of preview the New Year's Six games. Maybe that's something, and then an extra one the week before the national championship, something like that. So definitely keep tuned. I'm going to be doing bowl previews for every single bowl game this year. So there will still be plenty of videos coming at you throughout December, as well as what if videos and things like that. So plenty of content still coming. So again, there's 381 people in here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sticking through this. If you have not subscribed, please make sure to do so. If you haven't given the video a big thumbs up, I would encourage you to do that also, because it lets YouTube know that my channel doesn't suck. So it goes, oh, people are liking this. I guess it's good. It's engagement. So thank you guys so much for watching. Sincerely, this was extraordinarily cool for you guys to be here. I'm very humbled that so many people gave half a crap to be here. So yeah, until next time, guys, I will see you later. And make sure to go to other videos of mine and talk about whether this was the right move or not, because I'm not sure it is. All right, thank you guys very much. Bye. And 7 or maybe even 8 of those times. I think they are better overall on both sides of the ball than Ohio State is. But if you look at most deserving, it's Ohio State. So it's best team versus most deserving. And I think that's where a lot of this infighting is happening, where people are trying to defend one way or the other when that's kind of how it is framed. So some of the pros, Alabama was ranked number 1 all year long. Their only loss of the year was on the road in a rivalry game against the team that, after they beat Alabama, went on to become the number 2 team in the nation. If you're going to lose to a team, that's one to lose to. That is not that embarrassing. My eye test, and I think most people's eye test, says that Alabama's probably better than Ohio State. So how much is the committee factoring in eye test to what is actually going on, to the statistics, to all of this data that they supposedly have access to? Last week, how about I said Auburn? Last week, Alabama was ranked 5th in the poll. Ohio State was ranked 8th. Wisconsin was 4th. Wisconsin was undefeated. They had 2 one-loss teams and 1 two-loss team ranked ahead of them. The two-loss team that had already beaten Alabama. So Wisconsin was a team that the committee never really respected. Ask a Wisconsin fan if they felt respected by the committee. They did not. So if the committee did not respect Wisconsin, why would Ohio State, being ranked 8th, already being behind Alabama, beating a team that didn't really seem to impress the committee too much, why would that launch them 4 spots and leapfrog Alabama? That is something that the committee has not cared about in the past. If you look at 2014, Ohio State was 6th, TCU was 3rd or 4th, and they leapfrogged the Horned Frogs to get into that final spot. So maybe it doesn't matter. Vegas has Alabama as the favorite in the point spread on a neutral field against all 3 teams that we all presume are going to be in the playoff in Georgia, Oklahoma, and Clemson. Vegas has Alabama actually as the favorite in all of those games. They've never not been in the playoff, so putting Alabama in might be considered the safer bet because Ohio State has already missed the playoffs. Alabama hasn't. That could also be a con too, because maybe the committee's like, hey, you've already been in 3. If you get left out of 1, you'll live, right? So I don't really know. And the Clemson's number 1. Clemson will play in the Sugar Bowl. So whoever they match up with, whether it's Ohio State or Alabama, they're going to be number 4, I think. So that means they'll play Clemson in New Orleans. Tuscaloosa is a hell of a lot closer to New Orleans than Columbus is. Though when Alabama and Ohio State played in the Sugar Bowl a couple years ago, it was very well attended by both teams. Maybe that matters. Again, give UCF a shot with Scott Frost. See what USC could do. They wouldn't just be out of every conversation for some reason. Wisconsin, who had a perfect, undefeated regular season, which only one other team in the country can say, they would get a shot. The one loss wouldn't be detrimental. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Did I watch Boise versus Fresno? A little bit. So I was kind of flipping between that game, the Big Ten, and the ACC, and the two Power 5 conference championship games took precedence. I was also watching Arkansas State Troy, so I was kind of flipping around. But Fresno certainly had some opportunities. I remember a big fumble that Boise got when Fresno was driving. Is Auburn better than USC? I don't know. I really don't know. It depends on which Auburn team shows up. I think Kerryon Johnson, I don't want to say hurt his team, but him not being healthy certainly played a factor in the SEC championship game. And I felt like in the first Auburn-Georgia game, the Bulldogs let the momentum in a raucous stadium kind of take them away. And when it was more half and half, and they knew coming into it a little bit more what to expect from Auburn, they dealt better. I thought it was really interesting that in the first Auburn-Georgia game, that Georgia drove right down the field and scored a touchdown, and then Auburn took the game over. And in this one, it was Auburn that drove right down the field and scored a touchdown, and then Georgia took the game over. So it was a really nice role reversal. And, it's the way I view all of these rematches. So Auburn won the first game, Georgia won the second one. Both of them basically were blowouts. In the Fresno-Boise game, Fresno won last week at home. Boise won this week at home. So couldn't they kind of just be a wash? So if you were to look at the 18 playoff, Auburn would have a case. The game against Georgia, 2 of their 3 losses would be against the number 1 team in the country in Clemson and the number 3 team in the country in Georgia. So, is there any chance NC State makes the Orange Bowl? No. Miami will be in the Orange Bowl. All right, so I'm going to. We got about 50 minutes. I'm really hoping I don't forget. That would really suck if I was just talking and giving, pontificating about things, and then I was like, oh, it's like 12:15. It's already been released, so I have to keep an eye on time. But I have this little sheet of paper here. So what I want to do is kind of go over Alabama and Ohio State's schedules, and then kind of compare some pros and some cons that I came up with, and see what you guys think. So I'm going to do the Alabama one first. Then I'll stop and kind of read what you guys are saying a little bit about Alabama. So for the next hour or so, let's kind of try to keep it to the playoff. Because some of the bowl games are yet to be determined. I think those come out at 7 tonight. So that'll be really cool. The New Year's 6 game, it all depends on who gets where. So if Alabama gets in, Auburn will probably play Miami in the Orange Bowl. UCF against, I don't know, because it'll be UCF in Auburn in the Peach Bowl, Alabama, Miami in the Orange Bowl if Ohio State gets in. And then you'd have TCU, Penn State in the Cotton Bowl, USC, Wisconsin in the Fiesta, which is like a de facto Rose Bowl this year, but all right, anyway, so let me get into Alabama. So if we look through their schedule, the College Football Playoff, the first poll came out on Halloween. So up until then, they beat then number 3 Florida State, because remember, the committee takes into account what the ranking of the team was when they played them. So they beat number 3 Florida State, who finished 6-6. They beat Fresno State, who finished 9-4 and was the Mountain West champion. They beat Colorado State, who finished 7-5. They beat Vanderbilt, who finished 5-7. They beat Ole Miss, who finished 6-6, though is not technically a bowl game. I think they would count towards the bowl total because they finished 6-6. Traveled out to Texas A&M and beat an Aggies team that finished 7-5. Beat Arkansas and Tennessee in back-to-back weeks. Both of those teams finished 4-8. Beat number 19 LSU that finished 9-3. Traveled to number 16 Mississippi State. So starting with the LSU game, the College Football Playoff rankings were officially out. So they traveled to number 19 in the playoff ranking LSU. They finished 9-3. Or I'm sorry, that was at home. They traveled out to number 16 Mississippi State, who finished 8-4, with the Egg Bowl kind of sort of not counting. They played an FCS team in Mercer, and then they traveled to number 6 Auburn, who finished 10-3 and lost. So not the greatest resume in the world. Of those, they played 4 ranked teams when they played the teams originally. 4 of those were ranked. One of those was Florida State, which is no longer ranked. One of those is Auburn, which they lost, and they have an FCS school in there. So wins against bowl teams, including Ole Miss, would be 7. Wins over ranked teams currently in the College Football Playoff top 25 as of last week is 3. Wins over ranked teams as of Tuesday were number 17 LSU, number 23 Mississippi State, and number 25 Fresno State. That's it. Fresno lost, and the only team that Alabama lost to in Auburn lost. So that does not look good for Alabama at all. So made the little pros and cons list. These are in the pros. So I really think that if you look at Alabama and Ohio State as candidates, I think overall the safer bet is Alabama. So the way I kind of have framed the way I think about these two teams is Alabama's the better team. I do believe on a neutral field, Alabama would beat Ohio State. If they played 10 times, I think Alabama probably win. All right, I believe I am live. It is Selection Sunday. I almost said Saturday. It is Selection Sunday, so I am live. You guys should be able to hear me all right. Should be able to see me all right. Everything coming through. How is everybody doing on this very contentious day? If you guys have been watching ESPN at all any of this morning, the idea between Alabama and Ohio State is ripping the network apart. They have people on these college football panels just fighting with each other and taking really weird jabs at each other. Good morning, good morning. John, Nick, Matt, Connor, Alfred. What's going on, everybody? So, it is Sunday, December 3rd. It is time for the committee to select the 4 teams for the College Football Playoff for 2017. Although I think they call it the 2018 playoff for some reason. So we have about an hour until they actually make these selections. My TV is all the way across the room to the right. So if I'm glancing that way, that is what I'm looking at. I got my little microphone over here to the right. Just as a little bit of a warning for anybody watching on the replay or watching live, I did not get a whole lot of sleep last night. So if I randomly yawn or forget what I'm saying, it is going to be due in large part to the fact that I did not get a whole lot of sleep. So yeah, we got a good bit to talk about. Part of the reason why I didn't sleep a lot was I decided to make pros and cons lists for Alabama and Ohio State. So I'm going to go over those here shortly. But quickly, I want to kind of talk to you guys for just a minute. Chat is on the screen. Of course, I always get lost in chat with questions, and now with this kind of going over this. So if you are dying to ask me a question and want to make sure I see it, you can always drop me a super chat, just like $1 or $2 or however many you want to drop, I guess, and that will be guaranteed to see it. I have the actual super chat window open, so I won't miss them. So I can always circle back around. It may not be immediate, especially when I start talking about Alabama and Ohio State. So there's a chance. So if I'm looking to the right, it's to the TV. They keep having these people on that are just yelling at each other. Heather Dinich and Paul Feinbaum got into it earlier. And just a few minutes ago, Joe Tessitore and, come on, wide receiver for the Buccaneers, Joey Galloway, got into it. So it's been we're not the only ones that don't exactly know what's going to happen. So what did you guys think about the championship games yesterday? You had Clemson stomping Miami. I assume Clemson will be number one in the college football playoff poll. You had Oklahoma stomping TCU. I assume they will be number two. You had Georgia stomping Auburn, which was extraordinarily surprising to me, and I believe Georgia will be number three. It'll be between Alabama and Ohio State for the fourth spot. Even though, really, Wisconsin and USC should kind of be in this situation as well, in this conversation. USC has more top 40 wins than either Alabama or Ohio State, and they're a conference champion, and they had an aggressive non-conference schedule in Texas and Notre Dame, and they played a 9-game conference schedule like Ohio State did. And then, of course, Wisconsin went 12-0, lost by 6 points in a game where they were driving at the end of the game for a chance to go up 28-27 for the win. They were undefeated going into that game. Can you imagine if Alabama was undefeated going into the SEC championship game and then they lost to Georgia? Everybody would say, whether Alabama wins or not, they're in. But we are not saying that with Wisconsin, even though they have very similar strength of schedules. So it's pretty interesting that it was just like, yeah, Wisconsin's out now. Theoretically, they shouldn't be. So, I was talking a lot on Twitter last night about how I think Ohio State is probably going to be the team that they pick. I keep waffling between Alabama and Ohio State, not who I think should be in, but who I think the committee is going to put in, because when I was making the pros and cons list that I'm going to read out here in a few minutes, I would make a point, I'd be like, man, that's a really good point. There's no way they can keep Ohio State out. And then I would say something, and I would say, oh, man, that's a really great point. There's no way they can keep Alabama out. And it kind of went back and forth. So, yeah. UCF better than Alabama? Well, if we had an 18 playoff, we could figure that out, right? This whole thing, is if you're talking about who's number 4, Alabama or Ohio State, one of those teams is going to be number 4. If it's so razor thin, is number 4 really that much better than number 5? If not, well, then shouldn't number 5 get a shot? And if number 6 is going to end up being Wisconsin, which I think it may end up being, Wisconsin went 12-0. Should they not get a shot? This is why when you start talking about expanding the playoffs, these situations, you can say the regular season matters more with 4 teams, but I don't see it. So if we had an 8-team playoff, I kind of did a quick little jot down of nothing, just kind of what I was thinking. These would be your 8 teams: Clemson, Oklahoma, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Wisconsin, UCF, USC. Penn State would probably be somewhere in there. Maybe even Auburn, considering where they were at number 2 coming into this past week. That would be an extraordinarily fun playoff. That would be a great playoff.